You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
It was almost 10 when I pulled into the driveway. The shop had been slammed all week. Everyone suddenly needed their boats ready for the holiday weekend. That last job, a beat-up center console that barely had steering, kept me and Leo working under floodlights for hours. My lower back was *ling me, and I could still feel the salt and oil on my skin. All I wanted was a hot shower, something cold to drink, and the comfort of home, whatever that meant these days. I stepped out of the truck and slung my duffel bag over my shoulder, but I froze halfway up the porch steps. There were shoes on the mat. Not mine. Not Vanessa's. Not my kids'. They were men's sneakers, Nikes, black with a red stripe down the side. Size 11 or 12, judging by the look. Practically new. I don't know why that detail stuck out, but it did. They looked like they belonged to someone careful, maybe the kind who wipes his shoes after walking through grass. No scuffs. No dirt. My first thought was that maybe my brother had swung by. He used to stop in randomly, but it had been a while. Too long, honestly. And these didn't look like something he'd wear anyway. He was more of a boots and ball cap guy. Still, I told myself it was probably nothing. But then I opened the front door. The house was quiet. Not cozy quiet, like when everyone's asleep and the dog's snoring on the rug. This was sterile. The lights were off in the living room. The TV was silent. The air was cool, too cool, like someone had dropped the thermostat a few degrees too low. I dropped my bag at the entryway and called out, "Vanessa?" No answer. I walked through the living room, glancing toward the kitchen. A couple of glasses in the sink. No wine bottle, no dishes, no signs of dinner. I hadn't told her I'd be late, but she usually texted to ask. Not this time. I took the stairs two at a time. Our bedroom door was open. The bed was made or remade. The comforter was smoothed over, the pillows arranged too neatly. I stood there a second, frowning. Vanessa never made the bed in the evening. If anything, she'd leave it a mess until bedtime. Then I noticed it. The faint hum. The bathroom fan. The door was closed and the light was on behind it. I moved closer, about to knock, when I stopped cold. There was a smell. A strong one. Cologne. Not mine. This wasn't Old Spice or whatever knockoff body spray you find in a bargain bin. This was expensive. Foreign. The kind of scent that lingers in hotel lobbies or on suit jackets. Sharp, musky, almost sweet at the end. Definitely not anything I owned. I raised my hand and knocked. Silence for a beat. Then I heard the water shut off. The fan kept humming. Her voice came through the door. "Yeah? I'm just getting out." She didn't sound surprised. Not exactly. I stood there a second longer. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Just checking." The door opened not even 10 seconds later. Vanessa stepped out wrapped in a towel, hair damp, face scrubbed bare. She looked surprised to see me, but only for a split second. "Oh, you're home." "Yeah. Got held up at the shop." She nodded, brushing past me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, watching her disappear into the closet. "Saw some shoes out front." She didn't answer immediately. I could hear hangers clacking as she rummaged through her side of the wardrobe. Then, a little too casually, she said, "Oh, one of the neighbor kids. Came by asking to borrow a phone charger or something." "Which kid?" "I don't know. The one from down the street. The tall one." I didn't push. Not then. She came out wearing an oversized sleep shirt and no pants, her damp hair tied up in a loose knot. She didn't meet my eyes as she walked past me and slipped into bed, pulling the comforter up to her shoulders like it was the middle of January. "You already eat?" she asked. "No. Didn't have time. There's leftover chicken in the fridge." Her tone was flat. Not irritated, not warm, just businesslike. I stood there a moment longer before walking into the bathroom. The scent hit me harder in the closed space. That cologne again. Like it had been sprayed in the air, not on someone. I glanced around. No towels on the floor. The sink was wiped clean. Almost like someone had tidied up fast. I leaned closer to the counter. Her makeup bag was open. Lipstick cap off. A second toothbrush had been moved. Not new, just shifted. I turned on the faucet, washed my hands, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Don't jump to conclusions, I told myself. Don't be that guy. But I've been with Vanessa long enough to know what her routine looks like. I know how she moves, how she smells, how she talks when she's tired. And this wasn't it. When I came out, she was already facing the wall, pretending to be asleep. I got into bed slowly, careful not to disturb her. Or maybe hoping I would. She didn't move. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, that smell still lingering in my nose. It wasn't just the scent. It was the way she didn't ask how my day went. The way she gave short answers. The way she turned away from me like I was a stranger. I told myself not to overthink it. But then I remembered something else. Her phone hadn't buzzed all evening. Not once. That thing used to ding constantly: group chats, work emails, friends sending reels. Lately, it was always silent, always face down, always locked tighter than a bank vault. And then I realized I hadn't seen her phone at all that night. Sleep didn't come easy. I stared at the dark for what felt like hours, my mind tracing every small shift, every odd moment from the past few weeks. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe I was just tired. That work stress was making me paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had changed. It wasn't just the shoes. It was the quiet, the distance, the scent of a man I didn't recognize lingering in the corners of my home. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The room was still dim, the kind of early gray light that slips through the blinds when the sun hasn't fully decided if it's rising yet. I lay there in silence, listening to the soft whir of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Vanessa was still asleep, or pretending to be. She had her back to me, arms tucked under the pillow, breathing slow and even. Part of me wanted to reach over and touch her shoulder, just to feel something familiar. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, careful not to wake her, and slipped downstairs. I made coffee like I always did, 3 scoops, half a pot, the way my dad taught me. I watched it drip, one slow bubble at a time, the scent filling the kitchen. But the usual comfort it brought didn't show up that morning. My mind kept circling back to those sneakers. I hadn't asked again about them. I didn't want to come off paranoid, especially if it really was just some neighborhood kid dropping by. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. What kid leaves their shoes on someone else's porch and doesn't come back for them? Why would Vanessa let him in, especially upstairs, when I wasn't home? And that cologne. I could still smell it in the hallway, faint but stubborn. I've spent years fixing boats, stripping oil and fish guts out of engine compartments, and even then, I never smelled something that sharp. That deliberate. Whoever wore it had done so intentionally. I stood by the sink with my mug, staring out the window at the dock behind our house. The water was calm this morning. Still, with a kind of eerie peace to it, like it knew something I didn't. That's when the timelines started creeping into my head. Not just last night, but all the nights before it. I don't know what kicked it off exactly, but one memory bled into another. There was that Sunday 3 months ago when she said she had a team-building retreat in Hilton Head. It was last minute, she claimed. I'd offered to drive her, but she insisted on taking her own car. I remember thinking it was odd that she didn't pack much. And she came back with her nails still chipped, like she hadn't done anything but sit in a hotel room and scroll. Then there was the weekend before Easter. She said she was helping her sister organize some fundraiser. She didn't post any photos, didn't even mention it again. When I asked how it went, she gave me a distracted fine and started folding laundry like I hadn't said anything at all. And then there was her phone. It used to live on the kitchen counter while she cooked. She'd scroll while the pasta boiled or laugh at memes and show them to me between stirring sauces. Lately, though, that thing was glued to her hand. If she left the room, the phone came with her. If I walked by, she tilted the screen away. And it was always on silent. The kind of silence that screams. Even at night, she'd flip it face down before bed, slide it under the pillow like she was hiding contraband. One time I picked it up by accident, thinking it was mine, and she practically snatched it out of my hand. Said it was work stuff, and that her students had been messaging her all day. But I'd looked at the lock screen before she grabbed it. No notifications, just black glass and my reflection staring back at me. And her mood. God. Her mood had shifted in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. At first, I thought maybe she was just tired. Teaching middle school kids all day will do that to anyone. But then it got mean, snappy, cold. Simple questions started fights. Do you want me to pick up dinner? Turned into, why do you always make me decide everything? Did you sleep okay? Turned into, can we just not talk right now? I started tiptoeing around my own wife, filtering what I said so I wouldn't catch her on a bad day, like I was working for her, not living with her. The woman who used to curl up next to me after dinner and talk about growing old on the bay was now a ghost in my own house. Present but unreachable. And then there was the thing our son said. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd come home early from the marina and found him sitting at the table coloring. He looked up at me with that innocent, unfiltered energy kids have and said, "Daddy, Mommy's friend was here today. He sat in your chair." My stomach had dropped so fast I barely caught my breath. I tried to keep it light. "Oh yeah? What friend?" He shrugged and went back to his crayons. I don't know. He had glasses. He drank the orange juice. I asked Vanessa about it later that night, and she said it was probably just someone from the PDA. Claimed he came by to drop off pamphlets for some fundraiser. Said she barely remembered. Barely remembered someone sitting in my chair, in my house, drinking my juice. That conversation kept playing on a loop in my head. And the worst part? I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to believe all of it was just coincidence. That the cologne wasn't from another man. That the shoes belonged to a neighbor. That she hadn't become cold, just tired. That our son misremembered something he didn't understand. But that's the thing about instincts, you can't shut them off. Not forever. You can bury the red flags under piles of rationalizations and good intentions, but eventually, they start rising to the surface like oil in water. I knew something wasn't right, and I hated myself for not saying it out loud. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus at the dock. The marina was quiet, just me and Curtis working on a jet boat that had been out of commission for weeks. He cracked jokes, tried to lighten the mood, but I wasn't there. Not really. My hands moved on instinct, tightening bolts, checking seals, but my mind kept drifting. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it'd be Vanessa, that maybe she'd text something normal, want anything for dinner? Or, hope your day's going okay. But there was nothing. Not until after 4. One single message. Hey, we're out of milk. That was it. Not how are you? Not love you. Just milk. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Typed okay and deleted it. Typed I'll get it and deleted that too. Eventually, I just turned off my phone and tossed it onto the bench. Curtis raised an eyebrow. Everything good? I nodded. Lied right to his face. Yeah, just tired. He didn't push. Maybe he saw something in my face, maybe he didn't. But I was grateful he let it slide. By the time I got home that night, the shoes were gone from the porch. Neatly gone. Like someone had come back and taken them without a trace. The porch was swept. Too clean. The kind of clean that felt more like erasing. Vanessa was upstairs grading papers. I asked how her day was. She said, fine. I kissed her on the head. She flinched. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. Her back turned to me under the covers. And I started making a mental list. Not of proof. Not yet. But of the things I could no longer unsee. Started like any other morning. I was up before sunrise, pouring coffee into a thermos while the house was still wrapped in silence. I was trying not to make a sound. Partly out of habit, partly because I didn't want to see her. Lately, the idea of small talk felt exhausting. There was nothing small about what was going on beneath the surface, and pretending otherwise had started to feel dishonest. Even cowardly. Vanessa had become a stranger. A polite, aloof roommate I happened to share a child and a last name with. It had been a few weeks since the night of the cologne. A few weeks since the shoes. Since the shift in her voice and the walls that started building up between us like insulation, thick enough to muffle the truth but not keep it out. And then, just when I thought I could maybe coast on numbness, it all came crashing down at 4:32 a.m. on a Wednesday. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again. I told myself it was because I didn't want to disturb her sleep, but the truth was I didn't want to lie next to her. That space in bed had gone cold in more ways than one. I woke up to footsteps. Light, quick. Someone moving through the kitchen. I sat up fast, instincts sharp. My first thought was that maybe our kid had gotten up early to grab a snack. But the light wasn't coming from the fridge, it was the overheads. Full brightness. Then I heard a voice. A man's voice. It was faint, muffled. I stood, heart pounding, and followed the sound. And there he was. A man I had never seen before, standing in my kitchen like he owned the place. Tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, wearing sweatpants and a fitted tee, earpiece clipped to his head like he was taking a conference call at dawn. His back was turned as he poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher I'd filled the night before. Like it was his home. Like he belonged there. He turned and froze when he saw me. For a split second, neither of us said a word. Then his posture changed. Aggressive. Defensive. Like I was the intruder. The hell are you doing here? He asked, stepping forward. I blinked. This is my house. He tilted his head like I just insulted him. Vanessa didn't tell me you'd be home. That did it. I stepped forward. You've got about 5 seconds to tell me who you are and why the hell you're drinking from my glass in my kitchen before I put you through the door. He squared up fast. You think I'm scared of you? The tension in the room went nuclear. He was a little younger than me, maybe early 30s. Clean-shaven, lean, strong in the way someone who jogs daily is. But I've worked on boats my whole life. Pulled engines the size of small cars. I wasn't afraid of this guy, I was furious. Then I heard her voice behind me. Marcus, stop. I turned and there she was, standing at the bottom of the stairs in nothing but a robe. Her hair was damp. She'd been showering. Again. The pieces slammed together like gears catching mid-spin. I didn't need her to say anything. I already knew. This him? I asked, barely able to get the words out. She didn't answer. I turned back to the guy. You better leave. Now. He smirked like this was a joke. Nah. I think I'll stay. Then he stepped forward. That was it. The next few moments are a blur. He shoved me first chest to chest, hard enough to stagger me back into the fridge. I don't even remember throwing the first punch, but suddenly we were swinging. I landed a hit to his jaw, he caught me in the ribs. The kitchen table toppled. A chair cracked. At some point, I slammed him against the wall so hard the picture frame hit the floor and shattered. Vanessa was screaming. Our son started crying upstairs. I wish I could say I stopped. I didn't. He clipped me again across the cheek and I saw red. I wasn't fighting some random guy, I was fighting the months of denial, the lies, the gaslighting, the way she flinched when I tried to touch her. I was fighting the idea that this man had walked freely through the house I built with my own hands, with my own sweat, and claimed something that was never his. Eventually he backed off. Breathing hard. Bloody lip. Shirt torn. I'm not done, I said, voice shaking. You are, he snapped back. You just don't know it yet. And then he walked out. Cool as hell. Like the whole thing had been beneath him. I stood in the wreckage of my kitchen, my breath ragged, fists still clenched. Vanessa was crying now. Saying things I couldn't make out. Words like, I'm sorry and I didn't mean, but it was all background noise. None of it mattered anymore. A neighbor must have called the cops because 10 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. I explained everything. The intruder was gone by then, of course. They took my statement, took hers too. Told me I could file a report if I wanted to press charges. I didn't. What would be the point? The damage was already done. Later that day, I got a name. The guy, his name was Henry Becker. A college lecturer at the university downtown. Married. 2 kids. Apparently, his wife had suspected something too. She was the one who blew it all up. Confronted him at work. Reported him to the dean. Filed for divorce within 48 hours of the incident at my house. The fallout was immediate. University launched a formal investigation. Turned out he'd had more than one close connection with students and staff. Got suspended, then fired. Public statement went out. Local press picked it up like vultures circling Fresh Road *LL Vanessa in the middle of all of it spiraled. She went from defensive to devastated overnight. Her social media vanished. She took leave from work. Friends stopped calling. Her sister, who used to drop by every other week, stopped showing up. People talk in towns like ours. Especially when the story's this juicy. Married teacher caught in affair with a now-disgraced lecturer? Fistfight in the kitchen? Police called? Oh, people love that one. I became the guy who got cuckolded in his own house, only no one said it to my face. They just looked at me with that mix of pity and smugness. Like I should have seen it coming. And maybe I should have. But I didn't. I spent the next few days in a daze. Barely slept. Barely ate. I kept playing it all back in my head, the conversation, the fight, the smug look on his face. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal or the humiliation. It was the silence that came after. Vanessa stayed upstairs. Didn't try to talk. Didn't try to fix it. It was like we were waiting for something to explode again. But nothing did. The house just went, still. And in that stillness I made a decision. Not out of anger. Not even out of heartbreak. But because I knew deep in my bones that I couldn't live in this lie any longer. The woman I married was gone. And all that was left was a stranger in a robe standing in the wreckage of what we used to be. The morning after the fight, I didn't even go upstairs. I got dressed in the downstairs bathroom, grabbed my boots, and walked out the front door without saying a word. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want her version of things or another vague deflection that'd leave me spinning in my own head. I just wanted out. I drove straight to my sister Charlene's place on the north end of the bay. She didn't ask questions when she saw me standing there with a duffel bag and our son holding my hand. Just opened the door and said, "You hungry?" That was the first time I exhaled in days. We stayed in her guest room that night, me on the pullout, my boy curled up next to me like he used to when he had nightmares. This time, though, I was the one waking up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. I kept seeing his face. That man. Henry Becker. I found myself wondering what it was that drew her to him. Was it the way he dressed? Was he more successful? Smarter? Or was it simpler? Was he just new? A break from the routine of boat grease and late nights and me? I shook the thoughts off. They weren't helpful. I needed to focus. First thing Monday, I called a lawyer. The receptionist at the firm I picked, Carter and Bellamy, asked if it was an emergency family matter. I said yes. They gave me an appointment for that afternoon. The office was cold, full of polished marble and fake plants, and smelled like new carpet and old coffee. The lawyer they gave me, Maddox Carter, was one of those buttoned-up, lean types with silver at the temples and a voice that sounded like it had settled hundreds of arguments. I laid everything out for him, everything I knew, everything I'd suspected, everything that had gone down. When I mentioned the name Henry Becker, his eyes flicked up. You're not the only person who's said that name in this office recently. Apparently, Becker's wife had come to him too. Filed for divorce the same day I showed up. He's radioactive now, Maddox said. University's trying to scrub their hands clean of him. Good, I said flatly. Maddox nodded and leaned back in his chair. You said you moved out. Are you still paying the mortgage? Yeah. It's in my name. Keep paying it for now. Judges don't like it when someone bails on responsibilities, even temporarily. We'll file for temporary possession of the home soon, especially since you've got your son with you. I nodded. What else do you need? He gave me a list. Financial records, text messages, call logs, social media *TS. Any proof of infidelity I had. The more evidence we collect now, the less she'll be able to spin it in court. He paused. Do you have any kind of surveillance? I blinked. What, like cameras? Phone trackers, email access, devices with location history. Anything that could establish a timeline. I hesitated. Then I remembered the iPad. A few months back, Vanessa had logged into her messages through the shared family iPad. We'd bought it for our son's games, but sometimes she used it to read ebooks or check messages when her phone was charging. It was still in the kitchen drawer the night I left. Maybe, I said. Let me check. Later that evening, while our son watched cartoons in the next room, I drove back to the house. I didn't call ahead. She was there. I could see her shadow moving past the front windows. But I didn't ring the bell. I walked around the side, used my key, and slipped inside. The iPad was right where I'd left it. Charged. Logged in. I took it and walked out. Back at Charlene's, I went through the messages. My hands shook the whole time. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe just 1 or 2 texts. Maybe something vague enough to give me doubt. But there was no doubt. Hundreds of messages between her and Becker. Some recent. Some over a year old. It went back longer than I'd realized. Late-night chats. Explicit language. Plans to meet. Jokes about me. Jokes about how she still couldn't believe Marcus hadn't figured it out. My stomach turned. There were even photos. Not nudes, but the kind of selfies you only send someone you want to impress. Her in makeup she never wore around me. In outfits she told me were for work functions. In restaurants I didn't recognize. And him, photos of him with wine glasses, his hand on her leg, sometimes in her classroom, sometimes in what looked like a hotel room. They had codes. References to meetings and grading marathons. They weren't even being careful. I compiled everything. *TS. Timestamps. Backed them up to a hard drive. When I handed the drive to Maddox the next day, he didn't even blink. This will do. We filed immediately. Not just for divorce, but for full custody. Maddox told me the infidelity wouldn't automatically win me the case, but it would help paint the larger picture, especially since the affair had taken place under our son's roof. And the public scandal won't help her credibility, he added. Especially if her employer decides to investigate. And they did. A week after we filed, I got a text from an old friend of hers, a fellow teacher. Hey, just wanted you to know the school district put her on administrative leave. Becker's mess dragged her name into it too. The board is reviewing everything. Vanessa tried to get ahead of it. She sent me a message the next day. Just a few lines. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Can we talk? I didn't respond. 2 days later, she showed up at Charlene's. Knocked right on the door like nothing had happened. I answered, stepped out onto the porch, and closed the door behind me. I didn't want my son hearing anything. She looked tired. Diminished. But not remorseful. I just want to talk, she said. So talk. She wrung her hands. It's not what you think. I laughed. Loud. You're gonna start with that? She flinched. Okay, fine. It's bad. I know it is. But it didn't mean it didn't mean anything? She nodded. So months of sneaking around, texting him while you're upstairs in our bed, letting him into our house, our kitchen, our home, that didn't mean anything to you? Her eyes welled. I was lost. You weren't lost, I snapped. You were selfish. And you lied. Over and over. She took a step forward. Marcus, I need you to know I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, I said. And now you're trying to manage the fallout. You're not here for me. You're here because the story got out. Because your job's on the line. Because you're scared. But you weren't scared when you let him into our house. When our son saw a stranger in his home and had no idea who he was. Her tears started falling. I want to fix this, she whispered. There's no fixing it. I'll go to counseling. I already did. I went to a lawyer. She blinked like I'd slapped her. You, what? We filed. Custody too. No, she said, voice rising. You can't do that, he's my son too. Then you should have thought of that before you blew this family to pieces. She broke down right there on the porch. Cried until her legs gave out. I didn't move. Eventually, Charlene opened the door and looked at me. You good? I nodded. Vanessa left 15 minutes later, eyes red, face pale. Should have felt like a victory. Didn't. It just felt quiet, cold, like the sound a house makes when the door shuts behind someone who used to live there. I used to think custody battles were for couples who couldn't communicate. People screaming in courtrooms, dragging their kids through the mud just to hurt each other. I told myself we'd never be those people. Even after everything, I still hoped, foolishly, that Vanessa would do the right thing. That maybe she'd see the damage, own it, and step back for the sake of our son. But that's not what happened. The day she got served the papers, I expected fireworks. Yelling, tears, phone calls in the middle of the night. Instead, she went silent. For 4 days. Then I got the email. Subject line: Our son deserves both parents. It was long, carefully written. She said she regretted her choices, but refused to be villainized. Said she was still capable of being a good mother, and that one mistake, her word, shouldn't define her relationship with her child. She offered shared custody, alternating weeks. She wanted to keep the house. Said moving would be too disruptive for our son. She suggested I rent an apartment nearby to keep stability. I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. There was no apology, just a soft-spoken negotiation from someone who had already reframed the story to cast herself as the misunderstood protagonist. When I showed the email to Maddox, he barely raised an eyebrow. She's posturing, he said. It's a play. She's trying to appear reasonable. She wants to stay in the house. She's not going to, especially not after what happened there. The formal custody hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, Maddox advised I document everything: school drop-offs, meal planning, doctor's appointments. We're going to show that you're the stable one, that you've been the anchor through all this. I started keeping a log, not for revenge, for protection. Every morning I packed my son's lunch. I wrote it down. Every time I helped him with homework, gave him his allergy meds, took him to soccer practice, I documented it. I wasn't trying to prove I was the better parent. I just wanted the truth to be visible, plain, and undeniable. Vanessa, on the other hand, started slipping. She missed her first 2 scheduled visits. The first time, she said she had a work conflict, some kind of conference. The second time, she claimed she wasn't feeling emotionally stable enough. That one I actually understood. But what I couldn't understand was how she posted a picture of herself at brunch that same morning. Smiling, holding up a mimosa. The caption read, "Self-care is survival." Maddox ***ted it for the court file. When she did show up, she was inconsistent. Late pickups, abrupt drop-offs. She once forgot to bring our son's jacket back in 30-degree weather. Didn't say a word about it, just handed him over like she hadn't forgotten anything at all. He clung to me a little harder every time he came back. One night, after his bath, he asked me point blank, "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" I dried his hair with a towel and tried not to choke on the lump in my throat. "She and I had a really big argument," I said carefully. "And sometimes when grown-ups fight too much, It's healthier for them to live in different places. He nodded, then said, "But you're not fighting anymore." "No," I said. "We're not. So why can't she come back now?" I didn't have a good answer for that. Just hugged him and said, "Because some things take time." The hearing came sooner than I expected. It was a gray, rainy Thursday. We met in a courthouse 2 towns over. Neutral ground, Maddox said. Less risk of local biases. Vanessa arrived with a new lawyer, a young, overly confident type who looked like he'd practiced his whole argument in a mirror. She wore a navy blazer, hair tied back, minimal makeup. She looked like a grieving executive. Polished, calm. They filed their counterclaim 2 days before the hearing. It was aggressive. They accused me of emotional instability. Said I'd been erratic and unpredictable since the separation. Claimed I had shouted threats during the confrontation with Becker. That I had a volatile temper. And that I'd created a hostile environment unfit for a child. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This from the woman who'd cheated, lied, brought another man into our house. And now she was painting me as the threat? I asked Maddox if we should countersue for defamation. He just smiled and said, "Let's let her talk first." The hearing itself wasn't as dramatic as I'd imagined. We were seated at 2 tables, facing a family court judge who looked like he'd heard every lie in the book and didn't have the energy for another. Vanessa's lawyer went first. He made it sound like we were co-parents who just needed structure. "My client is deeply committed to preserving her bond with her son," he said. "She acknowledges mistakes in her personal life, but insists those actions never interfered with her parenting. She's open to counseling, mediation, any tool that promotes healing." It sounded rehearsed, clinical, like a script written by someone who hadn't actually met our child. Then Maddox stood, and he didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He just walked the court through the facts, the affair, the confirmed timeline, the photos, the text messages, the multiple absences during her visitation weeks, the documented medical appointments and school events I'd handled solo, the disciplinary hearing at her school district, the police report not for pressing charges, but for context. Then he handed the judge a flash drive. "Exhibit G," he said. "**TS of social media posts made during periods of claimed emotional duress." The judge clicked through a few. One of them showed Vanessa holding a cocktail with a friend at a rooftop bar. Captioned, "Healing isn't linear, but it looks damn good." I didn't look at her. When the judge asked if she'd like to respond, Vanessa stood and cleared her throat. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she began. "I was going through something personal and I made a series of poor decisions. But I've never neglected my child. I love him more than anything, and I've taken steps to work on myself." The judge nodded, jotted something down. 2 weeks later, we got the ruling. I was granted full physical and legal custody. Vanessa was granted supervised visitation for 6 months, with the option to petition for adjustment after demonstrating consistency and stability. She was ordered to pay child support, effective immediately. The judge also ordered that she vacate the family home within 30 days. She appealed the decision the next morning. Her new lawyer filed an emergency motion, claiming the judge had acted with bias and failed to consider the mother's primary caregiving history. It was nonsense. Maddox filed a response within hours. Meanwhile, Vanessa showed up at the school, tried to pick up our son without notifying me or the coordinator. When they refused, she caused a scene in the front office. That did not help her appeal. The court called for a review hearing the following week. Vanessa showed up with yet another lawyer, older, more reserved this time. Her story changed again. She claimed the affair had started after we separated. Claimed I'd exaggerated the timeline out of resentment. But Maddox had the iPad messages, complete with dates and GPS stamps. The judge looked exhausted by the end of it. He denied the appeal in full. Vanessa stood there, expression blank, as the ruling was read. No tears. No pleas. Just acceptance. Or maybe it was resignation. Later that night, she sent me one last message. I didn't expect it to go this way. I didn't answer, because deep down I think she had. I think she just hoped I wouldn't fight back.